Ken with Ty is brought to you by Washington Brown, the property depreciation experts. Number 5, Miriam. How would you invest $20,000 as a 20-year-old?
Yeah, that's an interesting one because it depends on, obviously, your circumstances. But look, if you wanted to do property, you might pull together with friends to put in a deposit if you've all got a good income and the capacity to borrow money and buy something. And you can start with a little regional property at $350K. But you've got to have the friends or family to do that with. You've got to have a partnership agreement in place.
Yep.
So that if someone wants out, you've got a legally binding document that everyone's agreed to under various circumstances what you're going to do. So I wrote about that in my book. If you're low risk, got a low risk profile, you might look at a high interest term deposit. If you've got a moderate to high risk profile, you might look at blue chip shares, you might look at a term deposit mix, you might look at green chip shares. And, if you're high risk, you might look at crypto, but be careful. Now, I can't give advice on any of that. I don't know enough about crypto, even though I understand the benefits of it and I like the concept of it. For me, because I haven't put the time and it doesn't interest me, I would need to engage an advisor to give me advice on that formally if I were to go down the path of building a share portfolio or getting involved in crypto. And I know financial advisors can't advise on it because it's not one of their products, but it doesn't mean that you can't have an off-the-record conversation around their understanding around it.
That's how the shared property portfolio thing, or buying a property with friends, that's actually how I bought my first 2 properties because I didn't have any money and it worked out really well. But I didn't have any partnership agreements. In hindsight, I wish I should have. And so I'd highly recommend you doing that because things can go pear-shaped. They didn't for me, lucky, but they certainly can. So.
Well, particularly with family, because you might buy in with a family member when you're younger and then 10 years later, someone wants to marry, settle down, have kids. They need their share of the equity out. And then what are you going to do? Say no and stop them moving on with their life. So you always consider it a business arrangement. You have to have the documentation in place to make sure that the rules are clear, everyone agrees, and what happens when it needs to happens.
And there are those other funds now where you can buy bricks in companies, like a little, 1/100th of a property. What do you think of those?
I don't know enough about them to comment. Look, I've seen a concept recently where a company will give you the deposit you need to buy a property that you otherwise couldn't afford, but when you come to sell it, they're going to keep 30% of the capital growth. And I find that horrific because if they're keeping 30% of the capital growth and you're selling to upgrade, you'll never be able to upgrade. You'll probably never get back in the market. So things may look good on the surface, but you always have to ask questions and look in the background and understand the implications and the complexity. So all of these buy a brick here or we'll give you the money for your deposit there or whatever isn't always great. And I've sadly seen parents help their kids to buy a property that they otherwise couldn't afford. Kid gets accustomed to the lifestyle in the suburb that they otherwise would never have been in. Then mum and dad want to retire. They want to sell the property, but kid's not happy and kid can't buy them out. So tantrum ensues and it turns to muck. So even when parents are wanting to help their kids, they need to have a clear arrangement in place there or get it done by a third party like a lawyer or an advisor, because I've seen parents suffer and struggle financially because their kids don't want to give up what they've become accustomed to that they otherwise wouldn't have been able to live and experience were it not for their parents in the first place.